Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest, reacting to some Toronto Raptors news. Obviously the Toronto Raptors have been seemingly losing a lot of our guys, a lot of players over this offseason, especially big men, and one of the guys we saw in the comment section a lot of people really wanted to keep was Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, and he just signed with the Minnesota Timberwolves on a league minimum, or a vet's minimum $1.8 million deal, 1 year, so we saw a lot of people sort of get angry and frustrated over this loss. It was something you and I sort of expected after all the signings we had coming in. But do you think this was a mistake for the Toronto Raptors not to bring back Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, who really embraced the culture, really embraced like that energy, defensive grit sort of theme we have with a lot of our players? And do you think it was a mistake to not bring him back on at least a minimum, Riker?
Ben, never in my life have I seen somebody work so hard for 18 minutes of basketball. This guy, he left his heart, he left his soul, he left everything out there on the court, and you have to respect that. He earned his nickname Rondae Hustle Jefferson, or perhaps he was bestowed it when just by his hustle. But that's really the start and finish of what this guy is able to bring. And some memes. I'm wearing my hat in sort of honor of that famous Rondae video where somebody goes to swipe his hat and he just gets mad. I can't remember who it was. It was in the locker room. Was it OG?
It was Norm Powell. Norm
Powell. He got mad. He stopped his interview. Bro, don't touch my hat. But again, this is coming from Ben, one of the biggest Rondae supporters last season, and I'm just not that broke up about seeing him not return to the Toronto Raptors. Not about his game, not about him as a person, just more about his game. If you can't shoot the three, you're unplayable.
Well, that's the thing we saw with Rondae Hollis-Jefferson in the playoffs. He was a guy that obviously was a staple in the rotation last year. I'll pull up his stats on the board, and you know, he played 60 games for this Toronto Raptors team, averaged 7 points, 5 rebounds. You mentioned before the podcast, probably all 7 of those points were off of offensive rebounds. But, you know, he was a really good passer for a guy that could play the forward position. You know, he was a decent free throw shooter. He had that little midi sort of shot where, you know, he'd come in, do that little left-handed fade, you know, get that thing in there. And it was pretty efficient, pretty effective, but we didn't see really any bit of Rondae Hollis-Jefferson in the playoffs, to the point that you mentioned. He could not shoot the three ball. Over the course of his career, it's gotten progressively worse in terms of percentages. Only shot 13% from the three-point line last year. And it wasn't a case like, I don't know, maybe a Bembry who's coming in and has a decent form, has some potential to shoot, but you know, probably just needs to get in the gym a little bit, get those threes up. Alex Len's a guy that's sort of developing that three-point shot as well. Rondae's jumper is something that doesn't really look fixable in the next couple years. It doesn't really look like something that will be fixed anytime soon. So probably over the course of his career, he's not necessarily a young guy anymore. And the Toronto Raptors, we bring it up I feel like on every podcast. They like 3 guys that can shoot the three and play defense. And if you want to play in the playoffs with this roster, that's sort of what's got to happen.
Yeah, and I'm curious. I'm searching Sean Marion stats as we speak, and I think Google knew that was where I was going, because I put SH in Google. Sean Marion stats was the first thing that came up. But the point that I'm trying to get at, and maybe I'm going to be proven wrong as soon as I look at his career three-point percentage. Yeah, it's not great, 33%. Is if you have a broken shot, you basically need to be gifted with that broken shot. Like that needs to be, you're drilling it down every day. If you have a shot form similar to Rondae and you're not already a good shooter, then you have to completely reinvent. You have to go straight back to the drawing board like Markelle Fultz or Lonzo Ball. You got to give the old 90 degrees and you got to go in and you just repetition. You got to fix it. And as an NBA player trying to shoot on the highest stage against the best defenders, that's a very long transition to become back to the level that you could be a serviceable three-point shooter. And you're absolutely right, Ben. It's getting progressively worse. So unfortunately, it's not something you can remedy. And we saw it come playoff time. Just couldn't have them out there on the court. And that's not a knock against his heart. That's not a knock against his hustle. He's one of the few guys on the Raptors that tried to offensive rebound and that was always trying to get a hand on the ball. But, you know, you got to have some sort of offensive game where you're basically forcing your offensive team to play 4v5.
I agree with what you're saying, especially in the playoffs when teams can really lock in on certain players and sort of get to scouting reports, make a defense that's purely set for your team. And if you don't have a guy, we saw it in the playoffs in the Western Conference with the Houston Rockets. Russell Westbrook, for as good of a player he is, teams just completely sagged off him, and it really neutralized the Rockets' offense. And they had 4 other shooters on the court, so that was really interesting to sort of look at. We see the problem with Ben Simmons seemingly every year the Sixers make the playoffs, so you have to be an extremely talented guy, a guy that's almost transcended to not be able to shoot and play minutes in the playoffs. But the point that I think a lot of people are bringing up is Rondae was such an asset for this team in the regular season. He was a massive part of all those win streaks we had, the Dallas comeback. A lot of those big games, Rondae Hollis-Jefferson played a big part in during the course of the regular season. And when you look at this season in particular, you're going to need depth. You're going to need those guys that can sort of grind out seasons, maybe get extra minutes, more minutes than they'd sort of expect, come in and be a starting caliber player, be a guy that's not afraid of the moment, which Rondae certainly wasn't in coming in and stepping in after not playing for maybe a game or two. And, with all the COVID cases that could potentially happen, injuries in sort of a weird season, teams are going to need a lot of depth, Riker, and the Toronto Raptors sort of let a quality rotation piece for the regular season just walk for $1.88 million. So were you sort of surprised by this? Because, I don't know, especially with everything that's going on, I would have liked to see Rondae back and have that extra piece of depth going into the season this year.
Let me dish out this food for thought, Ben. This season, unlike any of the past 9 seasons where we've had DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry, and then we had Kawhi Leonard and Kyle Lowry, and we were pretty confident going into last season what the Raptors would be able to do. There was always a level of certainty on how the Raptors are going to achieve, where they'll probably make it into the playoffs. This season, unlike any other, Ben, for me, it's a real toss-up. And I know you're a little bit more on the camp that they're still going to be fine. Maybe they'll be as good or better. But I'm thinking come playoff time, it could go either way. So while I'll sing from the rooftops that, yeah, it's important to win some of those regular season games, I don't see the point when you're coming into free agency 2021. You want to say, Giannis, this is a place where you can come in, be immediately a championship winning team. Why stack your team with players that you're only going to play in the regular season? Because seeding is only going to get you so far. Raps are not going to be ninth. No matter how bad they play, they're not going to be ninth. They're making the playoffs. They're not slipping to 8th or 7th either. I'll tell you that. They're going to be top 6. And so if you know for certain that they're going to make the playoffs, you might as well support your team, your core unit with guys that maybe you can play in the playoffs. And Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, you can't. There's no 2 ways around it. So I agree. You need to have a strong regular season, but in a season where you don't know how far you'll go in the playoffs, you might as well construct a team that'll give you the best chance.
But see, Riker, the point really is, and you brought it up, you want to have a strong-looking team for those potential free agents coming in with Giannis and stuff if we're looking forward to 2021. Obviously, I think we did make a lot of moves to sort of pick up the pieces of players that left going into the playoffs next season. So I think we should be fine enough on that front, and Rondae doesn't really affect that, especially with a minimum deal. But if the Toronto Raptors sort of fall to... I agree with you. I don't think there's any chance we fall to 7th, 8th, or whatever. But if injuries happen, different things sort of go on. A player like Rondae Hollis-Jefferson might be, and this might be a hot take, could be the difference in a tightly packed Eastern Conference where the Nets are getting better, the Sixers are getting better with Daryl Morey as their GM, bringing in Seth Curry, having actual shooters now around Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. The Heat obviously really seem to improve over the playoffs. You and I don't necessarily think that will hold into the regular season. That was more of just a blimp in the bubble, but they definitely will probably have a better regular season next year. Obviously, the Sixers and the Bucks are teams that we know are good. The East is getting deeper, too. The Pacers are still good. The Hawks are getting better. The Bulls actually have a real coach, right? This isn't going to be a cakewalk this year, and Rondae's a guy that you could make an argument would be more valuable to this team in the regular season for what he has now. Obviously, potential-wise, Bembry, these types of players have the potential to shoot. McCaw, so they might have a better chance of playing the playoffs. But in terms of right now, no sort of foreshadowing forward, I think Rondae would add more regular season wins, which are going to be essential when you're competing with these teams, during this weird regular season.
Okay. You said he was an integral part of that nice stretch that we had, including that historic comeback against the Dallas Mavericks. But I think a lot of it is his energy. And typically, when you have a bench unit coming in a game where the starters are already defeated, it's really that spark. It's just the enthusiasm. It's the energy. It's the thought that you could probably win. We saw it ourselves, Ben. I think we were both part of that epic comeback when we were playing for Team Newfoundland against Manitoba, but then put the starters back in, lost that game. I digress, but Ben, we know the magic that a bench unit, an inspired bench unit, can
Yo,
go
timeout. Us off the bench coming in, splashing threes, locking up on defense. We're both extremely undersized for our positions. We come in and just start locking people up, shoving, pushing, and stuff, knocking down threes, and then we get subbed out. That's how Team Newfoundland rocked that year. But I'll let you continue.
Just little grabs, little boop, boop, little grab the jersey, little boop,
rip, 13-year-old us.
Listen, Ben, we know the magic that can ensue when an inspired bench unit comes out. That's what Rondae Hollis-Jefferson did for the Raptors. But in equal parts, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. He just looked like pea and vinegar sitting on the bench come playoff time when he knew he wasn't getting played. I think his attitude was at times detriment to the Toronto Raptors. So I think it's not his skill level, it's his energy level. So I don't think it's terrible to lose Rondae Hollis-Jefferson if somebody else is willing to pick up that mantle, Ben. And maybe there is other guys. Maybe Matt Thomas could be that guy, or maybe Chris Boucher could be that guy. I think it can come from other places.
Yeah, and I'm looking at sort of Bembry as sort of being that energy type player going into next year. We obviously, he's a bit of an unknown. Didn't get a lot of minutes for the Hawks, but talking with people that sort of watch the league, a lot of people are sort of high on him. Apparently he had some really good games against the Boston Celtics, so that's a little positive thing to take forward, as obviously they knocked us out last year. Maybe Masai is sort of game planning for that potential matchup next year. But I don't know. Stanley Johnson's another guy that people are really high on. I'm pretty high on him. I think he really has the skill set to develop. Maybe with a year under Nick Nurse, getting his sort of mentality right, the talent's there. He could sort of elevate into that backup role where Rondae sort of played this season. I see where you're coming from, and I just feel losing Rondae, you go from a known guy to a bunch of unknowns. And maybe that's what the Toronto Raptors do. They turn these guys into players that can really, take a team to the next level without really people expecting it, foreshadowing going into the season. So I have trust in Masai that we'll be fine and we'll figure things out. But for $1.8 million, Riker, I feel like it could have been done.
Could have been done. It could have been done. It's hard to say that, that a known, in this case, is a bad thing, especially when we look at the depth chart of the 4 and the 5. We have Siakam and Boucher, and then we have
He could have
Aaron
played
Baines.
center, too, if we got injuries up there.
He could. It would be a terribly undersized center.
You got that
He's
passing,
no PJ
remember?
Tucker. He's no PJ Tucker. This guy is wild. He's out there like a loose horse, like a wild horse that somebody is trying to wrangle. He's just galloping around the court at times. I think his IQ was a little bit suspect to put him at the center position. Tries hard though. Tries hard. I'll give him that. But Ben, this is where I would agree with you in the fact that we both are very low on Len. No offense to Len, maybe he'll prove us wrong. And we think if Aaron Baines' injury happens at some point during the season, crucial time during the season, could end up being catastrophic. And I don't know how much confidence I have in Len. And then you have to really play with 3 bigs, Siakam, Boucher, and Len. It'd be nice to have a guy like Rondae Hollis-Jefferson in that situation. Plus COVID you have to worry about. So I will tip my hat to you for that argument for sure.
Yeah. I've been growing more and more I've been jumping on the Alex Len train as of late. I've seen videos. Everyone saw the 3-point shooting that's kid went viral over Instagram, him and Bembry working on it. If he can turn into a shooter, Riker, you and I sort of made that last video under the assumption that he's just he's like the Amir summer 3 shooter, right? Some are in, some are not, right? It's if he's that type of guy, then I sort of agree with you. But if he can be a big that spaces the floor, obviously score in the post because that's what he's known for, be a little bit more mobile than a JV type player, he can maybe be a potential guy. But I agree. I'm not gonna push all my chips on the Len table just yet. Rondae would have been a guy I would have liked for more insurance to play that sort of position. And you did bring a point up earlier that he is a guy that deserves to be in a rotation. And I don't think he was necessarily a locker room issue when he wasn't playing the playoffs, but you could definitely tell he wasn't the most jovial about not playing in those big minutes. So
that's one way to put it.
Yeah, so I don't think he was making a scene in the locker room or anything like that. He seemed to really enjoy his time with the Raptors. He's commenting on all their Instagram photos and stuff still to this seemingly till the day he signed with the Timberwolves. So shout out Rondae. He was a fan favorite for the year he was here. I wish him the best in Minnesota. Hopefully he gets more opportunity on a team that's really lacking that hustle and defense. So he'll be really used on that team over there. But you guys are the best for making this far. Check out the Twitter, the Instagram, all that cool stuff. Check out the new website. We have articles coming out there left, right, and center. Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, a lot of you guys were rotted about that, so leave a comment down below what your thoughts are on him moving on, the Toronto Raptors moving on from him. But, Ryker, you have any last words?
Yes. Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, Hustle Jefferson, it's been real, sir. Hopefully you don't watch this particular video. Watch any other one, because we've always been extremely high on you. This one, I was really bagging on you, but nothing but love, and, I'm wishing him the best in Minnesota.
Hustle man, chap.